The video that you're about to see has been created to demonstrate some of the basic philosophy and principles of the Toyota production system, or as we call it today, lean thinking, lean manufacturing, or lean administrative. The ideas apply equally to any segment of the business, but we take them into the kitchen to try to get them out of all of those areas so that people can watch without being encumbered by predispositions that they have about their current jobs. It is a go-see video where we ask people to watch and become engaged, which is also a critical part of being lean. So join us and enjoy. It's amazing what we can learn from our own intuition if we'll only watch and see what's going on in the process. Two of the most important points of what we call lean manufacturing involve direct observation of the process, and then once we understand what we see, effective use of countermeasures to remove the problems that we see, and in particular the use of what we call Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese word that means small change for the better. Many small changes for the better, and in particular, it means small changes that are created from the intuition, experience, and common sense of the people who do the work. Too often, we overlook these opportunities, and as Mr. Ono and Mr. Shingo at the Toyota Motor Works discovered, almost 9/10 of the time between paying and getting paid in our business involves waste, which can be identified through direct observation if we will only watch. So today we have a process for everyone to watch. Every shop floor, of course, is different, and we need to choose a shop floor which is easy to bring to many people, and one in which you all can provide some intuition because you have done the process yourself. So we pick a very simple process, and that process is making toast. Now, it is a simple process, but it does involve a machine, a toaster, tools,
a knife,
conveyance equipment, a plate. It involves a customer. In this case, it's my wife is the customer, and it involves a person who is doing the work, and that will be me. So I invite you to come to my shop floor where we can watch the process very carefully and watch with an eye for improvement to try to understand what can be made better in this process. Watch the video, and then we'll get your thinking before we continue with an improvement. Making some toast for my wife. Honey, I made you some toast.
Is it raisin toast?
Okay, I hope you enjoyed watching the before condition, and I'll bet since you were watching with an eye for improvement, you saw lots of things that could be improved. This, in fact, is what happens when we truly have direct observation. You know, we're all so much creatures of habit that we come to work, all of us, trying to do a good day's work, and we work around the problems. You know, the common expression is whatever it takes to get the job done. We're not focused on improvement when we're trying to get our jobs done. We're just focused on trying to get things done in spite of all the problems that crop up. But this time you came to watch the process with an eye for improvement. And what are the things that you saw? I'll bet you saw, for example, that I did an awful lot of walking around. We call that waste of motion. You saw me walk back and forth, perhaps 4 times. You say, well, did that any value to the function of making toast? So we look for that sort of thing and we try to reduce it. We look for ways to reduce steps in motion. And in fact, if we were able to move the toaster closer to the bread, that would reduce that particular motion altogether. This is what we call Kaizen, a simple improvement that can have a very big effect. One possibility, of course, would have been that I could have had a motorized track to move me back and forth. And Mr. Shingo would have called that a superficial improvement, because that would only be automating the waste of motion. He said, we need to find ways to truly reduce the kinds of waste that we see, not cover them up. Here's another example of motion. Motion is one of those wastes that's truly a people waste. Things that we must do in our jobs all require motion, but the question is, how much motion? Because we would like to have as little as possible. When I was searching for the butter in the refrigerator, how much time should I spend looking? I had to dig through the refrigerator on several shelves until I found the butter. Now that would be one of those things that we would say is necessary to get the job done, and that's true, but it is waste. The customer does not pay when we are searching for things. And almost every job has this condition. Could be a pen, could be a calculator, could be a crescent wrench. You may be breaking a sweat looking for this part. You may spend a very long time, but it's not work and the customer doesn't pay for it. You know, motion is often very tiring, stressful, sometimes even dangerous. But we're used to it. It's just something that we're accustomed to. So we do it all the time. Mr. Shingo pointed out on a number of occasions that eliminating waste is not the problem. It's identifying it. It's actually being able to see it. And sometimes we're so familiar with things that aren't working that we've forgotten about them. So we need to go back and observe directly, observe our own work, just like when we watch toast, in order to understand where those wastes are. When you eliminate motion from your work, you're making the job easier. You're making the day better because you're making problems that you've had disappear. And when that happens, you can do more work. It won't be more tiring, but it will be more work. Okay, so that's just one of the 7 wastes which Mr. Shingo identified. Here's another one. Did you get a little nervous and antsy watching me wait for that toast? Well, he said, you know, waiting is a big part of a process. The customer doesn't pay for waiting. There are times when waiting is part of the process where it's important. For example, if it's important for something to age or glue to dry, or if it's important for us to take a rest occasionally. This causes a delay in the process, but this is important because it's necessary as part of the work. But if we are waiting for a toaster, which is taking a very long time, what else could we be doing during that time? You may think that it's easy to find out what to do, but in fact, the person's time is very different from the machine's time, and often we pay people to stand and watch machines. Sometimes we buy a big machine and it's making defects for us, so we pay somebody to stand and be sure that it doesn't make a defect. This doesn't value the employee, and it surely does not improve our productivity. So there's another waste, waiting. In fact, there's a lot of waiting that goes on, not only for people. In fact, most often in factories and in offices, we don't wait. People don't wait, but material waits, information waits. It waits in inboxes, it waits on pallets, it waits even on trucks. It looks like it's moving, but actually it's just sitting there. It's waiting. And Mr. Shingo said, customers don't want to pay for that. That's increasing the time between paying and getting paid. That's another waste. Now, occasionally we do have to move that material. We have to move it from point A to point B. And you can't make a part, or you can't run a business without some transportation. You need to move things around. But how far? Well, that has to do with the distance between operations. And in fact, there was some transportation and another waste of storage, picking things up and putting them down. How many times did I pick the toast up and put it down in the process of toasting? The function here, of course, is making toast, and that involves picking it up once anyway, but how many times did I pick it up? And how many storage points were there? Often when we think of storage, we think only of the warehouse. And some storage in a warehouse may be very legitimate, but why everywhere else? Are our factories and offices warehouses, or are they workplaces? So we need to be able to see those wastes and identify them as waste, because every time we are storing information or material, we're not really adding value to it. Customer doesn't want to pay for that. We can't put at the bottom of the invoice, this product was stored many times, so we're charging you extra for it. So we call that value added from the customer standpoint. What is the value that the customer expects in the process? Here's another waste. Defects. Were there any defects here? Well, in this case, there was a very big defect. There was scrap. There were 4 pieces of scrap. And why? Because I wasn't making what the customer needed. Now, obviously, in this case, it would be easy for me to ask the customer, but very often, a factory or an office is set up working on things which are not needed today. Maybe needed next week, maybe needed next month, but they're not needed now. And if we're not careful, we'll end up producing something which we'll have to scrap. Now, there's a couple of other wastes that I haven't covered yet, and let me just mention one now. Processing. Sometimes in the processing itself, there are things which don't make sense. We do them because that's the way the process is designed, but maybe we need to look at the process more closely to understand how it can be improved. The way I had to cut butter in that first condition is an inadequate process. Sure, the function of buttering toast requires that we cut the butter, but nobody says it should be as hard as a rock. And of course, who can identify that waste? Now, of course, there needs to be a condition in your business when a waste like that is identified that we can make an improvement. In the real world, sometimes a person might identify a waste like that, speak to their boss, and their boss might say, you know, we have people who solve those problems. Why don't you just quit complaining and get back to your job? So simple things often are not fixed because we don't observe directly. The last waste, and the worst waste of all, we call overproduction. Overproduction is producing information or material either too soon or in too great a quantity. Now, in our traditional thinking, overproduction isn't even a meaningful word. How could it be a problem to produce more? Because we'll sell it. We'll sell it eventually. Or if we're able to do it sooner than later, why not? But if you think about overproduction, if we make something and we can't use it right now, we're going to have to move it somewhere. And that's transportation. And then we're going to have to store it. That's storage. And in fact, if we're making something right now that isn't needed, well, we're causing something behind it to wait, aren't we? We don't think of it as waiting because we're very busy, but the customer is waiting. The next job is waiting. Why do you suppose I made 4 slices of toast? Why would I do that? Well, I had 4-slice toaster, right? Now, I don't even know what the customer wants, but unfortunately, this is often the case. And if we don't know what the customer wants, then we may want to maximize the resource. We may say, Don't load that oven until there are 4 slices. Let's keep the customer waiting. More efficient, isn't it? Well, not if the customer's not going to buy it. We're going to end up scrapping it. So you see, this whole idea of the 7 wastes, if you look at it from an intuitive standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to look for these wastes. But in our workplaces, regardless of the jobs that we do, we're very practiced at not looking for these wastes. The day is very long, often. Very rarely do I hear somebody say, I had a great day. Well, the reason for that is all the headaches. All the things that you just observed in this process, you can observe these same kinds of wastes in any process. Shigeo Shingo, who was the creator of these 7 wastes, or at least the first person to report them, said, it doesn't matter whether you're making automobiles or baking bread. Waste is still the same. Continuous improvement is not about the things you do well. That's work. That's what your customer's paying for. Continuous improvement is about eliminating all of the things that get in the way of your work every single day, regardless of the job you do. The headaches, the problems, the things that slow you down, the things that cause you to say at the end of the day, I'm very tired, this has been a hard day. That's what continuous improvement is about. So why don't we stop right here and try to gather our thoughts as to what we saw in that process that can be improved. Simple things is what we're looking for. Kaizen. We're looking for the things that can be improved through your experience and common sense. No big machines, no innovation. These are improvements as well, but this is not what we're looking for with Kaizen. We're looking for many small improvements. So what are your ideas?
Pause the tape or DVD here to see if you can identify and suggest ways to remove the 7 types of waste Bruce defined, including motion, waiting, transportation, storage, defects, processing, and overproduction.
Okay, I'll bet by now you've had a lot of ideas as to what can be improved in what we call the current condition. And of course, any process can be improved if we watch and look for the improvements that can be made. Now, let's take a look and see what happened when my wife and I got together to make a better process for making toast. What type of toast would you like?
Wheat.
Okay. How many slices?
Just 1, please.
Very good. Do it. All set.
Thanks, dear.
So now you see what we mean by Kaizen. Simple improvements with big benefits. And simple improvements which come from direct observation and from the thinking and knowledge of people who do the work. For example, moving the toaster closer to the bread. How many times have you experienced this condition? The work you need to do is done on a machine which is far away from you. Why is the machine there? Maybe that was the spot that there was space on the day that the machine arrived. Or maybe that's where the telephone line is, or where the power is. But does it make it easy for you to do the work, or is it causing you to walk long distances back and forth between the two processes? So we focused on a simple improvement. We moved the machine. Another improvement that we made was to the butter. I know that it's necessary to butter toast, but nobody said that the butter needs to be hard as a rock. So we softened the butter, and we put the butter right at the point of use as well. No more searching. Since we don't need it in the refrigerator, we can put it right at the point of use. While buttering the toast is real work, because the customer has asked for it, we can eliminate the muda, or waste of over-processing, that is, putting too much butter on the bread, and at the same time eliminate the strain, or mori, of buttering by softening the butter. Finally, we can reduce the mora, or inconsistency of the buttering process, by making it easier to apply a standard and even amount of butter to the toast. We chose to keep the flatware where it was because that was a good location for it for other things. But notice that I picked the piece of flatware up on my way to the process while asking my wife what she needed. I was very careful in the order of the process because sometimes changing the order of the process can make a big difference. In the first video, I waited a long time to start the toaster. In the second video, I started the toaster as soon as I knew what the customer wanted. And very importantly, I knew what the customer wanted. I knew what she wanted and I knew how many she wanted. And therefore, I was able to make exactly what was needed. No overproduction. In fact, I preheated the toaster so there would be less waiting for the customer. Now the process was long, was still long, but I found a way to make good productive use of my time that was balanced against the machine time. Too often we think that a person's time is the same as the machine's, but it's not. A person can do other things. And once I realized this, I was able to load the toast, get that toaster process going, and then load the dishwasher and clean up. And I had plenty of time. In fact, I was still waiting. I had extra time. So these are simple improvements that were made. You probably thought of all of these as well.
Here's an interesting aside. At this point, it's important to realize that Kaizen is small, stepwise improvement. We're not aiming for perfection on the first try, but for something better than we have. And when we get there, it's likely that we'll notice something more we can do now to make things even better. In that sense, every target condition immediately becomes our new current condition. As you viewed the improved condition, your direct observation may have uncovered further opportunities to reduce waste. What did you see? Did you notice a potential safety hazard with the location of the toaster? Or were you waiting for Bruce to wash his hands? Why were the dishes in the sink in the first place, you might ask? And did you observe that an operation was missing in the target condition? With Kaizen, we are always watching for additional improvement, and the more eyes watching, the more we'll see. Now we've switched on that part of us that is going to notice waste and come up with small changes for the better. Everybody, every day.
And the most important part of this was that the customer was happy. I produced what the customer wanted. I made the part move faster. I made the job easier. I reduced the time between paying and getting paid. I reduced scrap. I reduced the number of steps that I had to take. I reduced searching. I made it a good day for me and for the customer. This is what continuous improvement is all about. So this is my challenge to you. Yeah, toast is simple to make. Go take a look at another process. Go take a look at your job. But this time, watch with an eye for improvement and see how many of these wastes you can identify and remove.